Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Yeah, gonna get to the whole Trump circus. Gonna get to all of that. Gonna get thoughts on the Trump defense. All of it. Trust me, we will not go through the program without bringing up something about Donald Trump's crimes. I guarantee you. But I got to start here because this shows how broken our system is. Look, we got a lot of problems in this country. A lot of problems. So where do Republicans spend their time in the House? Where do they prioritize their time? Well, yesterday, the Republicans in the House Appropriations Committee, they've adopted a new funding bill. They've adopted some new amendments to funding our VA. And what is that? Well, sorry, no gender-affirming care. No, can't do that. And no abortions. No, can't do that. And, just to add a little sprinkles on top, little glitter, if you will, they're going to ban the rainbow flag. No, children cannot have rainbow flags. And you go, do you have nothing better to do? Is this a huge problem at the VA? Is this happening a lot? Are there a lot of soldiers seeking gender-affirming care? And if there are they not of sufficient age to make decisions? You know, they did defend the Constitution after all. Should not all protections be, available to them? Evidently not. But, again, not surprising that our Republican friends are going to waste our time, waste our days, all the while, pointing fingers at Democrats for not getting anything done. Also, today, the fun little bit, they're going to go after Adam Schiff. And I found this interesting that 20 Republicans, there were 20 Republicans with some bit of courage to say, what? You're going to sue Adam Schiff for, what was it? I think it was like $16 million because he had the audacity to investigate Trump's crimes. The audacity. How dare they? How dare they? How dare they do their job? And this is one of those things where you just go, at some point, don't Democrats have to just come out and say, look at these clowns. Look at this clown show. It should not even be, 2024 shouldn't even be a race. Working people should be watching what Republicans are doing in the House and watching what they're doing in state houses across this country and going, why? How is this making our lives better? How is this putting food on the table, lowering the cost of education for our kids? How is this going to put gas in the gas tank? How is this going to do any of those things? And it's not. So while, the Republicans are over here doing dumb stuff, I happen to come across this Oxfam report that looks at, where we stand in the world, where workers stand. It's titled "Where Hard Work Doesn't Pay Off." And they go through and they look at all of the 38 countries that are on this list. They look at the worker policies like, wage policies like minimum wage, unemployment. They look at worker protections like equal pay, protections on the job, occupational stuff, protections from sexual harassment, parental leave, all kinds of things like that. They look at the right to organize. Is there harassment in the workplace? They look at collective bargaining rights. They look at the right to strike. They look at all of these things, sectorial bargaining, and they compile this stuff. And the top 10 countries, and I don't think there'll be much surprise, we're not in it. I know a lot of people have to thump the chest. We're number one. No, we are not. Slovenia, number one. Slovenia, number one. Followed by Sweden, France, Portugal, Italy, Iceland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Finland, and Norway. We're not number one, not even close to number one. You know how far not close to number one we are? How far down this list? Let me put it this way. At least Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico, South Korea, and Chile are below us. We're tied with Turkey for 32nd. Again, we're number one. Not so much. And this is where, again, I come back to the moment that we had better have politicians really out there thumping for working class priorities, thumping on how to get the working class back on the side of Democrats. Conservative Democrats, oh fine, moderate Republicans, great, but bringing workers back to the Democratic Party by pursuing policies that are going to help workers. I mean, that's the reality. We already know what this, and we found this out when we did our Working Class Heroes tour last year, when we went into solidly red areas and started talking about, what about good wage jobs? What about strong unions? What about health care? What about all of these things that Democrats used to stand for and still do? They got to get out there and fight for them, though. They got to get out there and stop with the extreme stuff. Stop with stop. Bread and butter. It's about the kitchen table. And on the divisive stuff, someone says, well, what about abortion? Well, abortion, the majority of the country is with us on abortion. Safe and legal. I say it all the time. I'm not pro-abortion. I'm pro-safety. I don't want my daughters dying in an alley. But we should be moving to policies that make people want to bring children into this world. That's where Democratic policy should be hammering. The polling is overwhelmingly on the side of abortion being legal. But it's got to look like Democrats, and look, this is because there's a media imbalance. Republicans have control of all of the right-wing media that they got. Massive. In fact, a little tooting of the horn today. We were included in Talkers Magazine's Heavy 100. We were included in one of the top 100 talk shows in the country. And I went through to see how many people would be, I don't know, center left-ish. And out of the 100, maybe 10. And this is where you go, there's an imbalance in talking to people. And it's something we got to do an awful lot more of, and on issues that are important to working people. To me, it's that simple. And we've got to highlight idiot politicians like Robin Vos, the Speaker of the Wisconsin House. On the abortion issue, he said, think how many Americans would be alive if our workforce, doing things to make America great if we hadn't had easy abortion access. He's basically saying we need kids, we need more people for cheap labor. That's it. We just need to, it's the old Tom DeLay thing from a number of years back. And you go, okay, well, what policies would you do to help encourage people to want to have children? Well, another statement of his is, as long as I'm Speaker, Wisconsin will never expand Medicaid. You go, but wait a second. It doesn't matter. It's all about the anger. It's all about the division. And this is where we better come around to how do we rebuild and revitalize the working class? Democrats, I hope you're paying attention. There's an opportunity here to grab back what was once yours. So today on the program, we no screener. I'm still suffering from COVID, so I have quarantined my studio, which means no screener. We're going to take calls, and when I say, hey caller, what's your name? What's on your mind? Please listen to the phone, not to the radio, and jump right in. So let's go. Let's who we got on line one. What's your name? What's on your mind?
Mark from Wisconsin. But it's amusing that the Republicans didn't mention banning Rainbow Land song by Dolly Parton, and Miley Cyrus even going as far as to ban the Rainbow Connection song by Kermit the Frog from the 1979 movie The Muppet Connection. I mean,
that's amazing. You just gave them an idea. Congratulations.
It's just remarkable that what they're freaking out about when it should be just a matter of course, accept people for what they are.
Yep.
And how many of these Republicans are just closeted, and Lindsey Graham, I'm talking about you, and that forget they go on the attack of gay people and trans people, and it just why are the percentage, because especially for trans people, the percentages of that are so low.
Yep.
But why are they so concerned about it?
Because it's divisive. I mean, it's something that they know is going to pit us against each other. It's something that they know that can, the old Jay Gould quote, I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. This is what this is. This is that red meat to get you and me at each other's throats.
It is just ridiculous that, that I know, one of my stepsons happens to be gay, but that's just, that's just the way it is. It didn't make me think any less of him. In fact, once he accepted his sexuality, he was doing better in school and became active in trying to establish some chapters in the school, about a chapter in the school for defending, LGBT rights. I mean, it's whatever should make you happy, and that's supposedly the pursuit of happiness is supposed to be core to the American identity.
No, it's the founding of this country: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and they specifically chose happiness over property for a reason. And that's why I love to point that out. We have the right to pursue our happiness. As long as what you do doesn't infringe on me, we're golden. And this is one of those issues, in my view.
Well, it's just ridiculous because they like to say it didn't mean happiness, it meant happenstance. Interesting is pursuit of wealth, and that's just nonsense. They said happiness, and they knew what they talked about and said happiness. I mean, it just is. Well, that's what I got for tonight.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for the conversation, brother.
Good stuff. Thanks for the call. Actually, again, this is where we need to be having these conversations. Because look, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a rainbow flag waving, out in the streets marching, pride person. I'm not. And I don't have to be. And the majority of us don't have to be. But if you want to be, knock yourself out. And as I said yesterday, what I would really love to see at these pride rallies are a whole bunch of people who look like they're just going to work. Doctors and lawyers and teachers and just regular average, your neighbors, showing up in sweatpants and a t-shirt. So that maybe we don't have to have his stepson starting groups to help protect others. Maybe we don't have to have groups. Maybe it's just, we don't care what you do in the confines of your four walls with consenting adults. Maybe we get to a place where we don't have to have these conversations because, you know what? You have the right to do whatever you want. As long as your rights don't infringe on others, it shouldn't matter. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So all over the social media today, the Fox Chiron got people's attention because as was floating under the image of Biden giving a speech and Trump doing whatever he was doing, it read on screen, "Wannabe dictator speaks at the White House after having his political rival arrested." And you go, that's not reality. That's not honest. That's not factual. It's not fair. It's not none of that. And in fact, Fox even issued a statement that the Chiron was taken down immediately and that it was addressed I don't know how it was addressed, but that's according to The Hill, that they did take it down immediately, but not before millions of people saw it. And just so people are on the same page, Joe Biden did not indict Donald Trump. Biden didn't do it. The Democratic Party didn't do it. Democrats didn't do it. There wasn't a politician who did this. It was a grand jury of regular, average, everyday Florida residents. Florida residents. Can I say that again? Florida residents indicted Donald Trump. 23 residents of Miami. They did it. Not Merrick Garland, not Jack Smith, not Kamala Harris, not the left, not the libs, not the media. No, 23 people from Miami who took time off of being on the beach to save the country. So if you want to blame someone, it's pretty simple. Pretty simple. You blame the criminal. We used to think like this. As a country, we used to blame people who did bad things. And I remember that guy, Beretta. It was a TV show. I know a lot of people not old enough to remember. But Beretta, you can't do the time, don't do the crime. It's simple. Now, here's the funny thing. You've got Lindsey Graham, who has said that he's warning the special counsel that if he indicts Donald Trump on anything in D.C., that January 6th stuff, there's going to be the wagging of the finger. And my mind goes this place. I can't help but think, what would John McCain say of his buddy Lindsey Graham? It's one of those things. He's got to be rolling in the grave. But let's go to the phones. What's your name and what's on your mind?
This is Jack from Merrimack, Wisconsin.
Jack, how are you today? What's on your mind, brother?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, talking about wannabe dictators, there's only one, and that's the one that clearly, if you listen to the evidence at the January 6th Commission hearings that were public, he clearly fomented both violent and political attempted coups on this country. And the second thing I have to say is this is just a wonderful case of them, the opposition using the philosophy of, I believe it was Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda, who said, accuse the other side of that of which you are guilty.
Yep.
So,
no, you need to bring it here to the U.S. LBJ once said that he wanted to accuse an opponent of having sex with a bull just to hear him deny it. This kind of stuff works, and it's up to us to get through it and put it where it belongs, in the trash bin. But at the end of the day, Trump is charged appropriately, in my view. But I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got to get to an email. Bill sends me this email. Said, Rick, you pointed out that Trump, you need to point out that Trump's resume would not get him a job at union-busting Starbucks. And he goes on to list Trump by the numbers. 2 impeachments, 2 indictments, 71 charges, felony charges between Manhattan DA and DOJ cases, over 300 classified documents stolen from the White House, 154,000 manufacturing jobs lost during Trump's 4 years, almost 3 million jobs total lost during Trump's term, 2,868,519 votes behind Hillary Clinton, 7,060,347 votes behind Joe Biden, 10 million votes behind Democrats in 2 elections, and more to come. The name of the loser. Let's go to the phones. What's your name? What's on your mind?
Hey, Rick, it's Alice.
Alice!
So, what I wanted to say was, the actions of the lunatics, performing their little fox outrage is nothing more than performance art, because, we got to keep the base stirred up. And if you really look, and I was sitting there thinking about this earlier today, the entire Republican Party, their platform and everything is based on fantasy.
Yep.
Everything's based on fantasy.
Well, it's based on the narrative that they're the victim.
Right. They're the victims, but everything that they put out is a fantasy. You know, Joe Biden did this. Well, it's a lie, so we can file that under fantasy. Trump is this fantastic, successful billionaire. Again, fantasy. I mean, they keep pushing this narrative. We're the victims because we wanted to take away your rights and you fought back and wouldn't let us. So you caused us harm. I mean, everything is a fantasy and a victimization.
Yep.
It's just insane.
I'm right there with you. Appreciate the thoughts.
Have a good evening.
Good stuff. Bill in Santa Fe sent me an email, said, well, what's Trump's defense going to be? Simply, his defense is going to be, I had every right to do it. It's the only one he can really go with. I was the president. I had the right to do it. That's I think, going to be his best defense. Now, he will spaghetti theory this to the umpteenth degree. It was everybody else's fault. I'm the victim. Poor, pitiful me. And there's not going to be really a plan. It's just going to be whatever grabs people's attention at that day. We are going to be inundated with, it's all Joe Biden. It's all, go on. It's the DOJ. It's Merrick Garland. It's the hot dog vendor on the corner. It's the person who came and scrubbed the toilet. I got to tell you, the one thing that's shocking to me, and this is, I digress, the picture of the presidential library in Mar-a-Lago, I got to be honest, I really thought there would have been a golden toilet. I thought that would have been a golden throne to the master himself. That would have, I got to question if that's really his bathroom. It's wow. We are just in one of these moments. Now, here's the thing, and this is what we're going to get a lot of. It's a lot of dueling narratives. Trump's attorney came out and said that the targeting prosecution of a leading political opponent is the type of thing that you see in dictatorships like Cuba and Venezuela. So they're going over there. Anything you do to hold someone accountable, that's tin pot dictatorship, and it's all bad. And then the other part of it is you got Trump coming out and said if he wins, he's going to appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States, Joe Biden and the entire Joe Biden family. And you go, projection much? And the answer, yeah. I mean, because this is all he's been. There's nothing new here. Now, Sally sent me an email, and Sally doesn't say where she's from, but she points out that she said, Rick, you were the first person I heard say Trump was a child and the result of poor parenting. Yes, I did say that. She said, I read Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, say almost the same thing today in the Washington Post. Not quite the same thing, but he said, Trump is scared, whatless. Because for the first time, and this is where the similarities is, for the first time ever, Trump is going to be held accountable. There's no backstop for him in this. And as Kelly said, he projects this strength. He projects when he's worried, he's attacking. That is the Trump MO. So we're going to see we got a cornered rat right now, and we better be careful, because these people do not believe in democracy. They don't give a tinker's damn about the Constitution. You, your families, me, nothing. They care about themselves, and they're going to do everything they can to protect themselves. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day John L. Lewis called miners who worked for Little Steel coal subsidiaries out on strike. It was an act of solidarity as conditions worsened on steel strike picket lines. The walkout was designed to force the closure of steel mills by stopping the flow of coal. 10,000 workers in as many as 19 mines owned by Republic Steel, Bethlehem Steel, and Youngstown Sheet and Tube dropped their tools. Bethlehem had not been one of the independent steel companies initially included in the Little Steel strike, but workers at its Cambria works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, walked out in sympathy with railroad workers at Bethlehem-owned Blacklick and Conemaugh Railroad. They had been refused a contract, Striking miners in Johnstown marched to Cambria Works to join the 7-mile stretch of picket lines. In Ohio, the Canton Federation of Labor voted unanimously for a general strike if the newly formed Citizens League attempted to force reopening of the steel mills. SWAC leader Van Bittner threatened to call out another 600,000 miners by week's end if the strike was not settled. John L. Lewis remarked, quote, "Labor is menaced by the force of arms of Republic Steel Corporation. Labor is calling attention to this situation so the law, government, or public opinion can begin functioning before another massacre takes place." UAW President Homer Martin added, quote, "It is our purpose to spread the light of democracy to every part of this land until autocracy and industrial slavery have been driven from the country." But Johnstown civic leaders and town officials had formed a citizens committee and prepared for battle as the miners approached. It seemed there was no end to the anti-strike violence. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
As Scottish literary giant Robert Burns wrote, "The best laid schemes of mice and men go oft awry." His 1785 poem, titled To a Mouse, could be directed today at the right-wing sloganeers who've been scheming so furiously to turn their hokey woke snobbery into a winning political stratagem. "Your local librarian is woke," they screech. "So is Disney Inc., some of your churches too, plus all Democrats, and oh my God, even Bud Light." Creeping wokeism is the new Red Scare, welfare queen, and Willie Horton political bugaboos rolled into one, forming the main, quote, issue of Republicans now running for president, Congress, and dog catcher. But rather than getting defensive, insisting you are not woke, consider firing back by saying, "Of course I'm woke." For the great majority of Americans, being woke is a very positive characteristic, meaning you're awake, attentive to what's going on. Indeed, in black communities, stay woke has long meant staying alert to racial and social injustices. But even some Republicans must consider it bizarrely self-defeating for their party's top candidates to be urging voters to go to sleep. GOP leaders explain that anti-woke means crusading against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. But wait, that means they're opposing America itself, for we are a nation united under the essential principle of e pluribus unum, as affirmed by everything from the Declaration of Independence to our kindergarten teachings of sharing and fairness. Ours is a country rooted in constant diversification, expanding equality, and the democratic idea that every voice ought to be included. Our country needs more of all three. This is Jim Hightower saying America is way short of achieving these historic ideals, but shame on those demanding we abandon even striving for them. Confront the charlatans.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, this week, some things to look out for this week. If you're someone who gets a lot of packages delivered to your house, could be an interesting couple of months. This Friday, the Teamsters are getting their UPS members, to vote on a strike authorization vote. I expect it to be very high, somewhere in the 95 to 99% range, way up there. And because look, this is something that Sean O'Brien ran on. They're gonna make that the job of the future. They're gonna help raise the working class up by making sure that those jobs pay, especially at a company that's as wildly profitable as UPS is. And here to share some thoughts on what the authorization vote might look like and what we're hearing about the negotiations. What little is being leaked out. That's why I've asked Michael Sonato to come talk with us. Michael's a labor reporter over at the Guardian U.S. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick, as always.
So, let's start with the authorization vote. Any idea where this is going to go? You agree with me, somewhere between 95, 97, 98%?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Sean O'Brien took over the Teamsters, kind of running on this. I've covered the anticipation of this. There's been a lot of organizing within the Teamsters union, fighting for this contract, and there's been some really big sticking points. And one of the biggest of all is, like you said, how profitable UPS has been for the duration of the current contract through the pandemic. UPS workers were working through it. We're not, being called heroes by management while they're pocketing, 12, 13 billion a year in profits. Yep. The CEO, it's like 27, in the 20s of millions of dollars a year. Those same kinds of pay increases weren't going to the workers, and there's a lot of issues. So locals have been holding their strike votes, the past week and a half. I think we're expecting the results to come out Friday. I think at the earliest. And I agree with your assessment. I think it's going to be overwhelming. A lot of participation in the vote, and I think it's going to be overwhelmingly in favor of authorizing it. And so we're about 45 days now until the contract expires, and the Teamsters have made it. If you go 1 second past the contract expiration without a tentative agreement in place, they're going to walk out on the job.
Yeah.
If that happens, it's going to be one of the biggest strikes in U.S. history. 340,000 workers all around the U.S. It's a big deal, and from workers I've been talking to, this is on the company. Share the profits. They did reach a tentative agreement on a big deal, which was UPS trucks have no air conditioners right now in them, and with the climate getting hotter and how hot those trucks can get, the back of the truck, they have workers who had their temperatures, they've clocked like upwards of, I spoke with one out in California. She said she's clocked 150, and the thermometer doesn't go past that in the back of the truck. They're ovens, basically. They're old, and all they're given are these little desk fans for the front of the car. It doesn't really do anything.
And they've also got in UPS's defense. In UPS's defense, there's also a window. I mean, this is how crazy this sounds. That in this day and age, at this moment, where you cannot find a vehicle on the road that doesn't have air conditioning, you cannot buy a car in this country that has rolled down freaking windows. There's still vehicles on the road doing essential work in this country where the person driving it is sweating their you-know-what's off. And in several cases, people have died from heat exposure while driving these vehicles. It's mind-blowing to me that they don't have it. And look, I remember, the freight contract that I was a part of years ago where we got air conditioning in the trucks. That was like 25, 30 years ago. How is it UPS has not been able to do this just in buying new vehicles, saying the new vehicles are going to have them? How is that possible, other than they don't give a rat's behind about their workers?
Yeah, and I think it was getting to that point where, I think this issue was picking up similar to what rail workers were fighting for with sick days. And, since then, they've started, the unions have been able to get some sick days, not what they're looking for since Biden stopped them from being able to strike this past December. But I think it was a really big issue.
Now you bring that up.
It was a big issue last summer.
Yeah. Now you bring Biden up. You bring him into this, and a lot of people really ticked at Biden about getting involved in that rail strike. And I argue that I never thought there was going to be a strike. I think they could have handled the sick days better. I think there's a lot there. Does Biden get involved if there's a strike here at UPS? Because this would be a major disruptor to our economy. Could UPS and FedEx and other entities pick up the slack?
Obviously, I think there would be big consequences for UPS and businesses that rely on them and whatnot. But they've made it abundantly clear the ball is in the court of management of the company. Like, you have the time. They've been very straightforward with what they're asking for. The air conditioners, that's been solved at this point. One of the biggest things that hasn't at this point is they have a two-tiered system right now, where part-time workers at UPS, they're getting paid, $15 an hour or right around there, and they're doing the same kind of work as full-timers. And an issue with that as well is during like peak seasons where they need those part-timers to fill in for the demand, or like the summer when things pick up and they have to cover like vacation time, they get a couple dollars more depending on just like it's called like a market rate adjustment, and then they take it away as soon as they don't need them as much. Right. I think that's a big thing right now is the full-timers want to see wage increases that are commensurate with how profitable UPS has been, which 12, 13 billion the past few years. During the pandemic, they didn't get any bonuses, hero pay, or anything like that. And part-timers, I did a story last year. Part-timers just got wage cuts because UPS decided.
I was going to bring that up. Here locally where I live, there are a couple of UPS facilities, and they were paying the inside people, the part-timers, the people who load and unload the trucks, they were paying them $24 an hour over the 14 or 15 of whatever the normal rate is. And just on one day, arbitrarily just snapped it back. And you go, is that not on some level wage theft? Is that on some level, aren't you supposed to give several months? You got hired in at $24 an hour. Now you go, well, they could quit or they could do all this other stuff. But it just seemed, one, arbitrary, two, unfair, and three, just plain mean. Especially as you point out, this is a massively profitable company who's done billions of dollars in stock buybacks, let alone all the dividends and share and things they've given out to shareholders. So they've got the money. It's just a matter of them not wanting to give it up.
Yeah, exactly. And these things have been kind of brewing over the past few years, and I'm sure you remember the last UPS contract 5 years ago under Hoffa. Workers kind of wanted to strike, and that leadership kind of shoved the agreement down the workers' throats and said, you rejected the agreement, but we're going to pass it anyways. And I think that kind of catalyzed the change of leadership we saw. And, obviously with Sean O'Brien taking over, he's been a lot more aggressive and kind of, in my opinion, a little bit more in tune with the rank and file of what workers have been asking for. The pandemic pissed them off. It pissed off, I think, every worker in this country. And I think, those things have kind of built a kind of like, camaraderie that I don't think has been at UPS in a long time with workers in different sections that, typically, full-timers and haven't really cared about the part-timers. But now that's kind of, it's a big issue in moving the company forward and, growing the Teamsters. And another thing is UPS has like a bad reputation with contracting work out away from Teamsters members, and they're that's another of their demands is that needs to end. You need to bring it back to Teamsters, or the people that are doing that work, make them Teamsters, make them part of the union. Stop exploiting these like little loopholes to cut labor costs, and pad the pockets of
stop outsourcing everything. You're right. Yeah, that's in a number of places as well, and I'm glad O'Brien's taking this on. But I had an old timer a number of years ago tell me, Michael, nothing that brings people together like a strike. And I remember the UPS strike back in '97, and I remember how huge that was, how much it hit the economy, and how they came and got some of the things that they wanted. The UPS people I'm talking to, they're full for bear. They want to strike, and this is where I keep coming back. UPS has got to come to the table with something to quash that want, because I think O'Brien's kind of put himself in a position where he's saying, well, if we don't get what we want, our people are ready to go. I think people are ready to go, so he better bring back something that's gonna tap that down, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen the past couple of years, workers are, I think, a little bit more, they have the appetite to want to strike and want to demand these things, and the inequality is, just abhorrent. Workers are the ones that are dealing with, inflation and the rising costs and getting, price gouged and, wage theft, right and left, all these different culminating issues. And, I think the public is in a big support. I think, with going back to the railroad workers, I don't think the bosses anticipated how much public support would be for those workers and the outrage and the continuance of that. I think when we saw that a few months ago with East Palestine, where those residents are still suffering from what happened there.
No, you're absolutely right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Michael Sonato. Michael's a labor reporter over at The Guardian. If you want to check out the work that he does, we'll get links out on social media. You can check that out. I want to change gears a little bit and ask you about this Oxfam report titled "Where Hard Work Doesn't Pay Off." Where, because we like to think that we're number one. I mean, you look at these UPS jobs. For some, these are really good jobs. Even for the part-timers, they're not bad. They have health care with, and they are good part-time jobs. They could be much better, and I'm hoping that they make them better. But, I'm looking at this Oxfam report and just showing me this idea that, how we like to thump our chests and say we're number one. We're not anywhere close to number one. In fact, according to this report, we're tied for 32nd with Turkey. And I guess, for you and me, this is old hat. We know this stuff. But the average working person, I don't think, understands just how far working people in this country are behind their peers in other countries.
No, and I don't think it's talked about enough. It's certainly, not brought up in schools how, in that the report kind of like points out the U.S. is the bottom of, they based it on the 38, economically developed countries. U.S. is on the bottom of the barrel when it comes to worker protections, organizing, union rights. We have a terrible unionization rate. Like England has, 23, 24%. That's more than double of what we have, and it's been declining in the U.S. Italy, where my father's from, it's like 50% or 30%. All over Europe, it's large sections. In the U.S., 11%, and a lot of that is just public sector workers. It's abysmal, and it just kind of like paints a picture of just how bleak things are with just how deregulation and
all of it, the whole neoliberal agenda, Michael, the deregulation, the privatization, the tax code, the hooray for me, all of that stuff has created this environment where the wealthy are doing great, and look, those policies are working exactly. Free trade, open borders, all that stuff working exactly as it was supposed to, making the rich richer and us, we the working people, much poorer. So the question I keep coming back to is how do we get working people to understand that they're getting screwed, and that we stop worrying about what people are doing in their bedrooms or doing in the bathroom stall next to you, and worry about how bad you're getting robbed daily.
I think we both kind of ask to, maybe a varying question of that every day in terms of like how do we fix
every day.
And we're bottom of the barrel on all these things when it comes to workers and wages in the working class, and we have the most billionaires. We're the wealthiest country in the world. But we don't have basic social safety nets or services or things like affordable, free healthcare every other country, that, in that report basically has it. We don't, every sort of barometer in terms of services.
Unemployment, wages, protections on the job, paid leave, sick leave, vacations, you name it, we're at the bottom of it. But because we're Americans, damn it. We work hard. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think the whole Horatio Alger myth that kind of propagated in the early 1900s with the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, that's kind of embedded in American culture and the American psyche. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of reckoning to kind of peel back and start reversing some of these troubling trends that we've been living in.
It's going to take us winning one strike at a time, and I'm hoping this UPS thing moves us in that direction. I'm hoping the workers that we see at Starbucks and Amazon and all across this country coming back to the idea that we should be caring about our fellow workers, the idea, rediscovering the concept of solidarity and a prosperous working class. These are themes that I hope we're finally getting back to, Michael. But it's guys like you who are out there doing the good work of educating and reporting, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much, and I look forward to having you come back again anytime soon.
Of course, anytime. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much. Michael Sonata, labor reporter over at The Guardian. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. We'll talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. During that summer, the battle waged over the efforts to unionize the southwestern West Virginia coal mines. The miners had been evicted from their company homes and had established tent colonies. One was located at Lick Creek. On this fateful day, state police and company gun thugs raided the Lick Creek camp. The police claimed that members of the tent colony had been shooting at strikebreakers. They arrested 56 men and destroyed the tents and furniture in the camp. One striker was shot down and killed. Later that summer, at their convention in Matewan, West Virginia, the delegates of the United Mine Workers of America adopted a resolution condemning the action. The attack on the tent colony was included in a list of grievances against the mine owners. It described the attack as one of the most brutal murders ever committed in the history of our state by the state police and deputies. Composed of the Baldwin Felts detectives was the attack on the Lick Creek tent colony on June 14, 1921, in which our brother, Alex Breedlove, willfully murdered by the state police while his hands were uplifted and begging for God to have mercy on his soul. The resolution went on to condemn the atrocities against the miners and demand the federal government and governor of West Virginia to restore law to the local police forces. The resolution was sent to the President of the United States, West Virginia's Governor Morgan, and the officials of the American Federation of Labor. It was also sent to labor and other newspapers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I gotta tell you, I'm hoping that a strike can be averted at UPS. I've said before, no one really wins in a strike, and we want to make sure that it's the last arrow in the quiver. And I've said this a number of times. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting what you need, if you're not getting what you earn, maybe you got to take that out. Let's go to the phones. What's your name? What's on your mind?
Am I on,
Yep.
Rick?
Go.
Yeah, okay, Rick. You know what the conservatives would say, Rick? They would say, well, how come everybody wants to try to get in here if we're at number 31 or 32 or whatever it was? So that would be the pushback. If it's so bad here, why are they trying to come here?
Yeah, but these are the 38 economic. These are the 38 OECD, the developed countries. The other 170. Those are the people trying to get her. And look, Mexico is below us on this list, so they're trying to make their lives better too. So that's. But here's the thing. Why would we want to compare ourselves to the most desperate on this planet? Shouldn't we be better than that?
Yes, I agree. Rick. Spot on.
All right, good stuff. Anything else?
No, you're doing a hell of a job, and keep up the good work. I learned so much every night.
I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Great stuff. No, but this is one of these moments where you go, at some point, do we not demand better? At some point, do we not demand all across, not just at UPS? Because look, UPS is a wildly profitable corporation. Wildly profitable. And they've been able to abuse that two-tier system for a while. They've been able to divide the workplace between the people who are driving the package cars, which is a tough job. Most people in this country could never do that. Could never drive that truck, especially in major cities, with the heat and the weather and the conditions and all of that. And then you've got the people who are inside, the people who work 3-4 hours a night. 2 o'clock in the morning, the 2 o'clock to 5 or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning shift for $15 an hour. And they do that because maybe they can get one of those package jobs. When I was a kid, that's how you got those package car driving jobs. You started off throwing boxes inside, at which when I was a younger man, now we're going back years, they didn't have the technology that they have today. But when I was throwing boxes at UPS, they wanted $1,200 boxes an hour coming out of the back of that truck. And a supervisor would stand at the back of your truck with a stopwatch. And they would periodically come by and they would count how many boxes were rolling off those rollers. And you better be moving at that 1,200 boxes. This is one of those things where these people work their butts off. They make this company huge amounts of money and they earn. I never say the word deserve. They earn every penny that they're demanding. And this is where the rest of us should be saying, you know what? Remember that idea, that concept of reward for work? That if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead? This is one of those things. When you've got a CEO making, $27 gazillion. In fact, Michael didn't share the story that he told me off air of talking to the spokesman for UPS saying, well, they don't need air conditioning. They've got fans. Tell me you've never been in one of those trucks without actually telling me you've never been in one. Because I know hundreds of people who do that job. I've been in that truck. I know how bad it is. I know how ergonomically not good it is. In fact, cracked my head open on one of them one time. So this is an opportunity to make that job just that much better, but not just that job. And this is why everyone should care about this. The idea of workers having some power to say, you know what, we demand a portion of what we create. That idea that Republicans used to believe of a meritocracy, this is that. So I would love my Tea Party friends to get their redistribution of wealth argument back out. I would love my crazy right-wing friends and their Horatio Alger stuff to come popping out. Because these people work their butts off. And we'll see what that strike authorization vote gets. I'm expecting I'm expecting 98. If I had to pick a number, it's going to be 98%. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
With regards to the complete rebuild of I-95 roadway, we expect that to take some number of months.
Gas tanker fire leads to collapse of major freeway overpass.
There are likely farms in every state that are knowingly or unknowingly dealing with these chemicals.
3 manufacturers agree to billion-dollar settlement as states sue over PFAS chemicals in drinking water. Plus,
the researchers say the latest event is gaining strength and could lead to record-breaking temperatures next year.
buckle up. El Nino is here to intensify extreme weather around the world.
Oh, great. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There's little question that Canada needs to obviously focus on forest management, but this isn't the moment to start lecturing people about the science of climate change. Right now it's about putting out a fire and keeping people safe.
The moment when New York Congressman Mark Molinaro figured out how to recycle gun safety denialism for climate change. This is your Green News Report. All right, Desi Doyen, as fires continue to rage in Canada, you've got great news about El Nino.
Yes, unfortunately, El Nino has officially arrived. The naturally occurring periodic warm pattern in the Pacific Ocean that gooses global temperatures is expected to strengthen over the winter, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Forecasters warn that this El Nino occurs on top of record warm ocean temperatures, which will combine to intensify extreme weather around the world. Storms, droughts, deadly heat waves, you name it, that are already worsening from human-caused climate change.
I'd rather not name it. The last year or so, we had some record heat, even though there was a La Nina, which is supposed to cool things, right?
Uh-huh.
And now we're going to have an El Nino.
Making it even hotter. Yes.
Fantastic.
And it's likely that 2023 and 2024 will set new records for all-time hottest years globally. A new study calculates that El Nino impacts are actually far costlier than experts had thought, averaging trillions of dollars in long-term damage, forcing communities to divert resources to fund recovery and rebuilding.
Well, maybe this isn't the time to lecture people on climate change, Des.
NOAA also announced that levels of heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere increased to a new record high in May, jumping at one of the fastest rates ever recorded, hitting 423 parts per million at Hawaii's Mauna Loa Observatory. Quote, continuing a steady climb further into territory not seen in millions of years.
And we were worried that it would ever reach 400?
Yeah. In Philadelphia, an elevated section of Interstate 95, one of the region's busiest highways, collapsed early Sunday morning after a truck hauling gasoline overturned and ignited underneath it. The truck driver was killed. The National Transportation and Safety Board is on scene investigating. Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro issued a disaster declaration speeding up federal funding for repairs. He warned reconstruction of the highway is expected to disrupt transportation for months. And I'll just note here that the adoption of electric vehicles will help take explosive trucks off the U.S. highways. In accountability news, 3 manufacturers of toxic PFAS forever chemicals have agreed to pay more than $1 billion to settle the first wave of lawsuits alleging the chemical companies contaminated drinking water across the country.
That's good, but not enough.
The settlement came after multiple investigative reports revealed secret industry documents showing exactly how manufacturers DuPont and 3M knew decades ago that their PFAS forever chemicals were a danger to human health, but publicly insisted the chemicals were safe and purposely distorted public knowledge about PFAS in their products. A new study from UC San Francisco details how, quote, the chemical industry used the tactics of the tobacco industry to delay public awareness of the toxicity of PFAS and, in turn, delayed regulations governing their use.
Well, we got to have our Teflon pans.
Over the last 2 weeks, more than 24 states have filed suit against PFAS manufacturers to pay for the mounting costs of cleanup of the chemicals, which are now ubiquitous in the population and environment. Here's Maine's Attorney General Aaron Fry on CNBC.
3M and DuPont created these chemicals, had the science that showed just how dangerous they were, how toxic they were, how they were going to last forever. It is my responsibility to do whatever I can to hold accountable those companies that profited off of this chemical.
Good. Yeah. Go get them.
And finally, some good news in Minnesota. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has revoked a crucial permit for a controversial proposed copper and nickel mine in the northeastern part of the state, concluding the permit did not comply with water quality standards set by a sovereign downstream tribe.
A lot of good news coming out of Minnesota these days. Wait a minute. Isn't 3M based in Minnesota?
Yes.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the Senate did something today. Oh, no, it was actually yesterday. I get my days mixed up. I got this COVID brain fog. I think that's what it is. But evidently, the Senate did their job. They confirmed someone. Biden's chief economist, Jared Bernstein, who's been on this program over the years a number of times. He has now been confirmed. I guess that he's now going to start doing the job of continuing to make our economy better. And I like Jared Bernstein. I think he's a bright guy. I think he's a good guy. I think he's the right guy for the job. And thank goodness Tommy Tuberville, the dumbest guy in the Senate, didn't show up, which made the vote that much easier. So at least you did something positive. Dumb guy. My thoughts. I don't want you to come along with me. But here's the thing, and this is what gets me. I look at our Republican friends and all of the division, all of the nonsense. You know, they're going to sue Schiff? Really? Going to go $16 billion. And yet they're moving economic policies that are going to be horribly destructive for the working class. In fact, my favorite, we talked about this yesterday, the Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. And what does it do? Well, it makes rich people richer, and you and me poorer. Here to share some thoughts on these handful of bills that our Republican friends have thrown forward. I've asked our good friend Amy Anauer to come talk with us. Amy is the executive director of the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, itep.org, the website. Amy, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Rick.
So let's get to these economic bills that our Republican friends are going to be moving forward. This Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. Bottom line, working families in this country, what can we expect if this becomes law? How much can I put in my pocket? How many movies can I take my wife to? How many ball games can I take my kids to? How much am I getting from my GOP friends in this Tax Cuts for Working Families Act?
Yeah, well, it's the most misnamed thing you ever heard of, because this thing gives more than $16,000 to people in the top 1%, while regular working class families get about $340. That's what the people in the middle get. The poorest fifth get just $40. So, poor people in this country are going to get enough barely to fill one tank of gas. If you're middle income, you're going to get enough to maybe buy 4 tires. Actually, not even.
What tires are you buying?
Yeah, well, I found some online that were that cheap. And then, if you're wealthy, more than $16,000, you could buy an economy price car. Of course, the top 1%ers aren't buying an economy price car. But even more than that, Rick, I think the point is, it's the $340, and your kid's tuition goes up, right? The price to take care of your older parents goes up. Your child care you got no chance that anybody in government's going to help you pay for it. So it's, what it does is it defunds our ability to kind of deliver for working class families the things they need, the things that create jobs, the things that keep our infrastructure strong, and the things that help us take care of our families.
And the thing that gets me, and this is, now look, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. But this piece of legislation doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell of passing. There's no way this becomes law in this day and age. I don't think it even gets out of the Senate. And if it does, by some miracle that they do anything, Biden's going to veto this. So as a messaging vehicle, I look at this and going, this is supposedly, and I've said this a couple of times, the Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. And you're only in a performative messaging bill giving working families between $40 and $340? Really?
Right. Well, they're giving $61 billion to the richest fifth of Americans. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And, we just, as you might remember, it's been like 2, maybe 3 weeks, we had this huge showdown that, the world was going to end if we didn't bring the deficit down, if we didn't bring the debt down. And this is going to add incredibly to the debt. So I don't understand it either. I don't think it's a great messaging vehicle. I think it's bad for America, and it's bad for our inequality. And it just continues to kind of drive us further apart and make this country function less well.
But Amy, this whole tax cut fetish is bad for America. This whole addiction to tax cuts for the very wealthy is bad for America. And look, we've been trained like Pavlovian dogs to every time we hear, taxes to foam at the mouth without asking who we're taxing, why we're taxing, what we're going to use it for. And those line of questioning, we've just trained. Taxes foam at the mouth. And yet, time and time again, we working people get screwed over and over. And even in, I'll ask this as a question. Am I making too much of a deal out of this, that this is a messaging bill? This is a messaging bill showing us what Republican priorities are, and they've called it the Tax Cuts for Working Families Act, and working families get barely enough, as you pointed out, to get a tank of gas, and certainly not enough to get tires on the car. Maybe one and a half tires. But I'm sorry, I'm curious who these working people are that the Republicans are messaging to.
Right. Well, and you didn't even get to the foreign investors, right? They would get $23.8 billion.
I was getting there.
So, yeah. I mean, I think that there's just an assumption that we're just not that smart, that we can't do addition, that we can't sort of figure it out, or like you say, that we just foam at the mouth. But the fact is, tax cuts for the uber rich and tax cuts for corporations are not popular. I think working people and middle class people and just regular people across the board recognize that if you're earning billions of dollars in this country, you should pay into the country that made you rich. You should support the roads that enable you to get your products out. You should support the schools that enable you to hire workers. And so, a lot of what's in this bill is corporate tax cuts that are huge giveaways to a lot of corporations that don't pay their fair share already.
A big giant welfare check we give to our wealthy, while demeaning people who need a helping hand at the bottom. People like my mother, who needed food stamps when I was a kid. And I'm not ashamed of it. The reality is we needed that help, and we got that help, and our country gave me that opportunity to pay the kind of taxes that I pay, and I'm happy to do it because I want to make sure that kid growing up like I did has the same shot. And this is where these are conversations we don't have anymore. It's all about how do we make billionaires possible, when the reality is the vast majority of us aren't even going to ever meet a billionaire, let alone be one.
Right. Yeah, and we're pricing a lot of things just completely out of reach of working families. A college education, it used to be that you could work a minimum wage job in the summer and pay for a year of school at a state school. No more, because so many states have just cut their taxes, again, usually targeting those tax cuts to the very wealthy and to corporations, that tuition at a state school is no longer within reach from a minimum wage job. Well, partly because the minimum wage has gone down so much, but so we really need to kind of step back and say, what do we want? Yeah,
to highlight that, here in Pennsylvania where I live, the president of APSCUF, the faculty union for the state system of higher education, he told me that back in the 80s, the state and local tax base picked up about 2/3 of the cost of an education. Student picked up about 1/3. Today, that number is completely flipped upside down to where the state and local tax base picking up maybe 25%, and the student is picking up 75%.
That's right. And then what happens is kids get out of school, right? They've got this debt that's saddling them down. They can't possibly buy a house because the housing prices have gone up so much, and because they've got so much student debt. So, that's for kids who are lucky enough to be able to get a 4-year degree. For people who are unable to get that 4-year degree, they're facing a job market that doesn't value them. So I think we really need to sort of step back and reset and say, if you're going to call something, what did you say it's called again? The Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. It should do something for working families, and it shouldn't be something that's uber charging our inequality, making the 1% wealthier, enabling corporations to get away with not paying anything. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like when John Roberts says he's going to call balls and strikes, probably should have asked what game he was talking about. Same thing. If this is for working families, I kind of need to know what your definition of working families are, because I don't think Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk's family, I don't know that those are working families.
That's right. And, like one of the tax breaks in this thing, bonus depreciation, it's something that helped dozens of Americans, hugest corporations, avoid $50 billion in taxes over the last several years. And I'm talking about like Verizon, FedEx, Walt Disney, General Motors, Amazon. These are huge companies that make billions from the American people, and we need them to pay into the system that got them rich.
And this is where I'm a big fan of a much higher corporate tax rate. And help me here, because I believe that you go back to the golden age of the economy, the 50s and 60s, when unionization rates were really high, where the CEO was making 20, 30 times that of the average worker. But corporate tax rates were in the 50% range. The top marginal tax rate was in the 90% range. I argue that when you had those higher tax rates, workers got higher wages because, look, rich people they don't want to give the government money, so they gave it out in higher wages. They gave it out in investments in the local community, hospital wings, schools, all kinds of stuff. But the money was being used in the community, and I would argue efficiently. But by giving our billionaire class unimaginable wealth that most of us can't even fathom, and being able to hoard it and have overweighted influence, we've really caused ourselves a major crisis.
No, I think that's right. I mean, we when tax rates were higher, and particularly when companies actually paid the rates that they were at, right? Because that's the bigger problem than the rates, is that companies don't even pay the rates that we have because of these tax breaks. And, one of the other business tax breaks that this legislation the Republicans just passed out of committee would make it easier for private equity firms to buy businesses. Like, we need more private equity in our economy. What drove Toys R Us and Payless into bankruptcy, tried to take away pensions from workers in those industries. Like, that's the last thing we need, right?
Yeah. No, there should be legislation to break up these behemoths, not encourage more of them. I do want to go back to the foreign investors making a boatload of money. How is it that our politicians that we vote for seem to have more concern for foreign investors and for foreign corporations than they have for American workers? I think I know. I say all the time, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. This is another one of those things that shows me that Republicans hate working people. But again, this is a messaging bill. Why would you put this out there, or who are you messaging to, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to ask whether people are messaging to their donors or whether they're messaging to citizens of this country. And, that's the question we got to ask, right? We have far too much money in politics that just does a lot to pull the strings. And one of the kind of givens is that if the Republicans take over the House or the Senate, they're gonna put through tax cuts for wealthy people and corporations. It's something that seems to always happen. But I agree with you. I don't think it messages well. I don't think the American people are buying it. And one of the things that's kind of encouraging, Rick, is that I think the next generation is really not having it, right? Like, I think a lot of young people are just pissed off. As I was mentioning before, they've got student debt. They don't find themselves able to buy a house. They're struggling to find a job where they can get a union contract. They're struggling to make decent wages. And so, you know, I think just as we're seeing more attempts to organize unions in workplaces, I think we're seeing more of a sentiment from young people that they'd like to see rich people and corporations taxed, and they'd like to use that revenue to make our economy kind of work for all of us.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I have some hope. I do. I'm not all doom and gloom all the time. But Amy, I appreciate the thoughts. I hope folks will check out your report on this. The trio of GOP tax bills would expand corporate tax breaks while doing little for Americans who need it most. You can see this over at itep.org, itep.org. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. Amy Hanauer, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Always love talking to you, Rick. Thanks so much.
Good
Take
stuff.
care.
Our good friend Amy Hanauer, Executive Director there at the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy, itep.org, the website. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Now, I got to tell you, it's amazing to me. It really is that this is a messaging bill. This is a messaging bill saying, "Hey, working people, look how much we care about you. $40, $40. You'll get $40. For you, solidly in the middle class, you'll get $340. And look, $340 is, I'm not saying it's nothing, but is that worth throwing everything else away? Quite, shocking, to be honest. Quite shocking when you think about it. It's a messaging bill. I love the Wall Street Journal article today that pointed out that Republicans are now becoming less dependent on corporate America. And I'm going, really? They're saying smaller donors are making up the Republican Party's allies. And I'm going, really? I still think there's some corporate cash being flown underneath. But, hey, the Budweiser thing probably scaring a lot of corporations away. A lot of the craziness that the GOP's putting themselves in, probably scaring people, I don't know, just a little bit. You think? But we're in this moment where things are changing. And this is where I make this plea to working people. Look at these bills that they put forth. And look at the I say this about every budget, about every economic vehicle that they use. Look at what their priorities are. Look at who they're taking from. Look at who they're giving to. This goes back to me to 8th grade government class. I still remember Mr. DeSillo at the front of the class going, the reality is government decides who gets what. If you don't participate, if you don't vote, good, makes my vote stronger. I get what I want. And it was, for me, that was one of those crystal moments that government decides who gets what. Do I like it? No. But the reality is I would prefer it that way to Elon Musk deciding who gets what, to Jeff Bezos, to a handful of billionaires, a handful of oligarchs. And this is where I get into trouble with a lot of my conservative friends because they're, I don't believe in government. Government's bad. Well, then you believe people are bad. Bad people make bad government. And when Republicans are in charge, they show us just how badly they can run government. That is absolutely true. There is no arguing with you on that. I am 100% behind my conservative friends who say government doesn't work as long as you add the amendment that Republican-led government doesn't work. Republicans hate working people. What do we get? Now, a system of representatives fighting for we the people, actually wanting to do their job, actually wanting to make people's lives better, actually wanting, and I know I talk about this a lot because I think about it a lot. I think about the kid growing up in that housing project that I grew up in. Now, I'm miles economically and geographically away from that beginning. I've been very fortunate. I've worked hard. I've played by the rules. I've done pretty well for myself. I want that for that kid growing up in the place that I grew up in. I want that kid to have every opportunity and more. And I fear that the pathways that were available to me are not going to be available to them. So I think about that person a lot. How to make that person's life better. Not how we take food off of their table, not how we kick them out of low-cost housing, not how we make them pull themselves up by bootstraps they don't have. It's quite remarkable to me. And yet, we're in this moment. We're in this moment where the Republican Party has shown us who they are. They're void of real ideas that are going to help working people. And Democrats, there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity for Democrats to stop all of the extreme stuff. For instance, Illinois. You got all these red states across the country. All these red states across the country were banning books. You got all Alabama, Mississippi, they're all banning books. We've got to get books out of the school, got to ban them. So what does Illinois do? They pass a ban on banning books. And I'm going, no, that's not the response to this. The response is to go after those places that are doing this, educate a little bit, but not go extremely the other way. Because, look, there are some books, perhaps, that shouldn't be in the hands of children. So then go way to the other extreme, I'm not on board with either. And that's where I think the mass of the American people are. We don't want polar opposites fighting each other all the time. I understand there are ideological differences. Joe Walsh and I are friendly. Joe Walsh and I have had spirited conversations, but we're on the same page on defending democracy. We're on the same page on a number of issues. But ideologically on a lot of things, we're in different worlds, and we'll fight. But here's the thing. I believe that the two of us sat down over a beer, we could come up with solutions to make lives better. That's what I want from our government again. This idea that, well, if you do something, I've got to do this, and we end up in these weird spaces. What I want them to do the job that we send them there to do. I would like a political system, if we could get it, and this is where engaged, active, educated voters, looking at messaging vehicles like this Working Families Tax Act, have to hold elected people accountable. And here's the thing, by them doing this, and all of the craziness we're seeing coming out of Marjorie Three Names and Lauren Boebert and the rest of them, they know they don't care about you or me. They're not afraid of we the voters, because they think we're going to keep buying red hat, blue hat. And at some point, I'm hoping, it's always my greatest hope, the greatest email I get from people, and if you want to email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, I do answer the angry and the evil and the hateful first. In fact, the people who wished me quite ill and demise, not this time, sorry. It looks like I'm going to pull through. But here's the thing. The one thing that I love when someone emails me, they say, look, I don't like you. I think you're an idiot. I disagree with you on everything. But this one thing made me think. This made me think just a little bit differently. This made me, I didn't know that. That, to me, is the best email I could get. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. During that summer, the battle waged over the efforts to unionize the southwestern West Virginia coal mines. The miners had been evicted from their company homes and had established tent colonies. One was located at Lick Creek. On this fateful day, state police and company gun thugs raided the Lick Creek camp. The police claimed that members of the tent colony had been shooting at strikebreakers. They arrested 56 men and destroyed the tents and furniture in the camp. One striker was shot down and killed. Later that summer, at their convention in Matewan, West Virginia, the delegates of the United Mine Workers of America adopted a resolution condemning the action. The attack on the tent colony was included in a list of grievances against the mine owners. It described the attack as one of the most brutal murders ever committed in the history of our state by the state police and deputies. Composed of the Baldwin Felts detectives was the attack on the Lick Creek tent colony on June 14, 1921, in which our brother, Alex Breedlove, willfully murdered by the state police while his hands were uplifted and begging for God to have mercy on his soul. The resolution went on to condemn the atrocities against the miners and demand the federal government and governor of West Virginia to restore law to the local police forces. The resolution was sent to the President of the United States, West Virginia's Governor Morgan, and the officials of the American Federation of Labor. It was also sent to Labor and other newspapers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
As Scottish literary giant Robert Burns wrote, "The best laid schemes of mice and men go oft awry." His 1785 poem, titled To a Mouse, could be directed today at the right-wing sloganeers who've been scheming so furiously to turn their hokey woke snobbery into a winning political stratagem. "Your local librarian is woke," they screech. "So is Disney Inc., some of your churches too, plus all Democrats, and oh my God, even Bud Light." Creeping wokeism is the new Red Scare, welfare queen, and Willie Horton political bugaboos rolled into one, forming the main, quote, issue of Republicans now running for president, Congress, and dog catcher. But rather than getting defensive, insisting you are not woke, consider firing back by saying, "Of course I'm woke." For the great majority of Americans, being woke is a very positive characteristic, meaning you're awake, attentive to what's going on. Indeed, in black communities, stay woke has long meant staying alert to racial and social injustices. But even some Republicans must consider it bizarrely self-defeating for their party's top candidates to be urging voters to go to sleep. GOP leaders explain that anti-woke means crusading against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. But wait, that means they're opposing America itself. For we are a nation united under the essential principle of e pluribus unum, as affirmed by everything from the Declaration of Independence to our kindergarten teachings of sharing and fairness. Ours is a country rooted in constant diversification, expanding equality, and the democratic idea that every voice ought to be included. Our country needs more of all three. This is Jim Hightower saying America is way short of achieving these historic ideals, but shame on those demanding we abandon even striving for them. Confront the charlatans.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've been waiting all day to talk to my next guest. She's written a book. It's called Data-Driven Truckers Technology and New Workplace Surveillance. And look, this book I've had a front row to. She's taking a look at the trucking industry and all of the things that have happened over the last 30, 40 years to use truck drivers. The analogy they use, the canary in the coal mine, that's one of them things. But I like to use it as guinea pigs. all of the things they want to do to the rest of society, they start with truck drivers, especially long-haul folks who aren't as organized and aren't as able to push back. You know, the CDL stuff, a national driver's license, and now with all this electronic data and all of this collection and all of this Big Brother watching, there's a lot going on here. And that's why I've asked Karen Levy to come talk with us. Karen's an associate professor in the Department of Information Science at Cornell University, also an associate member of the faculty at Cornell's Law School, also field faculty in sociology, science and technology studies, media studies, data science, and of course the author of Data Driven. Karen Levy, thanks for taking time for us.
It's so nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
What a resume you've got there. Almost couldn't get it out, but hey, great book. Let me start with the first question. Why someone with your academic credentials, why worrying about truck drivers?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know any truck drivers before I started working on this project. I've been working on it for about 12 years now. So, my background is in sociology and in law. And I was really interested in how, in lots of different areas of life, we use digital technologies to enforce rules in different ways, right? Maybe things that we depended on trust before, or we depended on human beings to decide how they were going to enforce rules. In lots of different contexts, healthcare and education, all over the place, we turn to computers to do that, right? And often to surveillance technology. So I was looking for a place where I could really study that and study how it was affecting folks. And I was really interested in doing something about work and labor, because that's where we see a lot of this kind of rule enforcement happening. So it was kind of a fluke, to be honest with you. I ended up listening to a story on the radio about the fact that truckers were going to be digitally monitored. Their time, which is federally regulated, was going to be monitored via these digital devices called electronic logging devices. This was back in 2011. So I heard that story on the radio and I thought, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So that day I went to a truck stop just outside Portland, Oregon, which is where I was living at the time, just to see what it was like to talk to truckers. And it turns out it was great. I had a great time talking to truckers. They were super open and generous with me, told me a lot about their work and their lives. And it became really clear that there was a story that more people should hear about what the life of being a trucker was like and how technology was changing their work.
Well, what they wanted to do back then to truck drivers eventually is I would argue already in the workplace today. A lot of us just don't know it, but it's this constant surveillance and this constant technology is going to be our future and their savior. And there's two schools of thought in this, and you write about this in the book. There's this, it's going to be fabulous. We're all going to, have these wonderful lives. It's kind of what they did with deindustrialization back in the 80s. Get rid of those dirty factory jobs and we'll all breathe clean air and have white collar jobs with corner offices. But here again, what happens, the working class end up taking it on the chin, or it's the dystopian thing like I've said. We're going to all be looking for jobs because there's going to be no work available. So can you talk a little bit to the juxtaposition of those two polar opposite points?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's exactly right. People tend to be either incredibly enthusiastic and excited about the prospect of new technology, or they're really doom and gloom dystopian. And I think the answer, not surprisingly, is it's somewhere in the middle, right? A lot depends on how you use it, on how the organization is deploying it, right? There are worker-friendly ways to use technology for safety, certainly. But a lot of what we end up seeing, and this isn't shocking, right, is that managers deploy these tools or regulators deploy these tools in ways that actually fail to solve the real problems that exist in a workplace like trucking. And there are real problems, right, as you well know, related to safety, related to undercompensation of labor, related to the fact that truckers don't get paid for a good deal of their workday, right? Those problems are not touched by the technology. Instead, the technology is used to just police folks harder, but not to actually change the root causes of the problems in the industry, create safe places for them to sleep, et cetera, right? So you end up in this kind of middle ground where the technology really changes what the work looks like. It doesn't necessarily take jobs away, right? It hasn't necessarily led to a shortage of jobs, right? Instead, what it has changed is the dignity of the jobs that people have, because they're joined in the truck cab by cameras that are in their faces and tools that are tracking all of their behaviors and their eyelids and to just see if they're too tired to drive, all that kind of stuff. So it has really changed what it is to be a trucker.
No, you're absolutely right. And what it's done with these stricter hours and the stricter laws and all of this surveillance is what it's done is it's put the responsibility solely on the backs of the drivers. It's trickled down to it's that guy's fault, and it's not the companies. And the companies push people, especially in non-union sectors. Now, look, I've been fortunate my entire driving career. I've always held a union card. So if I'm tired, I'm pulling over and I'm taking time. If I can't do something, I'm not doing it. If a truck is unsafe to get on the road, it ain't happening. I'll give you a perfect example. Right when they came out with the 14-hour rule, I was 3 minutes from the terminal, 3 minutes. And as soon as the 14th, that minute to the 14th hour, I pulled over. I said, hey, come get me. I'm around the corner. And they're like, you're only 3 minutes away. I go, yeah, I'm only 3 minutes away. Come get me, because I'm not moving this truck after the 14th hour. That's how inflexible these rules are. And had I, and you know this as well as anyone, had I been 1 minute after that 14th hour and some drunk ran into the back of me, I'm going to jail.
Yeah, you'd be in violation, right? And that kind of the flexibility and the autonomy that we demand of, really critically essential workers, right? We like to talk a big game about essential workers, but we don't necessarily build the infrastructure that they need to get rest, right? Even if you're able to pull over, right, after 14 hours, the chances you're going to find a place to do that safely in many parts of the country, there's no place to do that safely. Yeah. So we get mad about that too, right? You're not allowed to do that either. So, we can talk a big game about it, but ultimately we don't give people the tools that they need to be successful. And a lot of people, to your point, have relied upon the fact that the rules have been enforced, in kind of a wigglier way, right? Like without digital enforcement. And because that was what truckers needed to do to get the job done and put food on the table and keep the lights on at home, was to break the law. Now that wasn't a good situation either, right? Like that, I don't think the status quo is not a good situation. But again, instead of providing the infrastructure folks need, compensating people for the labor they actually do, our solution has just been to crack down on, as you pointed out, right, the least powerful people.
Yep. This is Karen, where I go. The reality is this is another example of trucking, of deregulation in the trucking industry and airlines, or you name what we've deregulated, and I'll show you an industry that workers have been screwed over in. When there were rules in place, when unions were strong, when I started in the LTL industry, the less than truckload industry, it was 85% unionized. And you had jobs that were family sustaining wage jobs, excellent health care benefits, excellent retirement security, good working conditions. You didn't have people running funny books and double books and doing all kinds of legal things, because you had a union who was saying, we're not going to let our people do this. And, Reagan forward, and look, Jimmy Carter signed it, but Reagan really used it. And here we are in this moment where basically trucks are nothing but sweatshops on wheels, with people behind the wheel who are struggling to make ends meet and to meet the demands that are put on them. So more crackdown, more rules and regulation, that ain't helping. But here's the other thing, and you talk about this in the book. I think we're moving towards an era where, in maybe 20 years, but there aren't going to be any more humans behind the wheel. They're going to be automated trucks. I think you could do it right now in a lot of instances. So I'm curious your thoughts. Is that going to be ultimately where we head? Because we got to make the road safer, Karen. You know how that goes. We got to protect the children. So screw those families, those drivers, and all of the industry. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, so you're right. I read about this in the book. I initially kind of maybe had the impression that, maybe surveillance of workers and automation of workers are substitutes, right? You either have this heavily surveilled worker, heavily surveilled trucker, or that person just doesn't have a job because now we have automated trucks. What I think the reality looks like, though, in the medium term, like over the next few decades at least, is that the technology is good, right? But it's not good enough to replace truckers because, as you know, a truck driver does a hell of a lot more than driving a truck. There are lots of other components of the job. Even the technology that allows for self-driving trucks is not there yet. And it's some people don't know if it'll ever get there, right? Where it can really replace a driver. So what AI looks like, right? What these new technologies look like in the truck cab now are not really replacing drivers, but surveilling them in these even more intimate ways. So sometimes that looks like, a camera that's on the driver's face at all times, where AI is used to detect if the driver is too tired, right? Like they'll look for something like the driver's eyelids fluttering or head nodding, right? To see if they're too tired. And if they are, they'll sound an alarm and flash some lights in his face, right? And of course, tell the manager. sometimes it looks like wearable devices, right, that detect a driver's brain waves or heart rate, right? So actually where I think AI is in the truck now is not so much replacing the driver, but actually surveilling them even more, right? Like actually making them more of a cog in the machine.
No, and this is where I think they're attempting to make the industry so untenable. It's so annoying with buzzers and beepers and all kinds of things to keep you, your eyes in other places, that people are going to leave the industry. People my age, look, if I had health insurance tomorrow, I'd give up driving tomorrow. And I know a lot of people who would do it as well, because you've taken what brought you to the road away. You've now made this factory work. You've now made this, you're just in an office with somebody overseeing you. And I think that's part of the plan. This is where we may disagree. I think part of the plan is to make this job so untenable that eventually they have to go, hey, well, we can't find people. We got to go to automation.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting, I can see that for sure. And, there's a deep irony in that, because if you look at the regulations or you look at what companies say about why they deploy these technologies, like you said, it's all about safety, right? It's all about
always is.
The public, and everybody wants safety, right? Like nobody wants unsafe roads. So that's like very easy to galvanize around that message. But as you pointed out, right, the folks that get driven out by these tools are the people you most want on the road, right? The people who've been on the roads for decades, who have millions of safe miles under their belts. And those are the guys that are going to leave, right? Because exactly what you said, right? Like they know what they're doing. They're experts. They know their bodies. They know the equipment. The folks who are less likely to leave are the 21-year-olds or the 18-year-olds who just got their CDL, right? Who don't resist in the same way because they never know any different. And what other job are they going to get that isn't like this, right? But those are not the drivers you most want to be next to on the highway.
No,
right?
and their behinds are on fire. Look, they're only getting paid when the wheels are turning. If you really want to start dealing with issues in the trucking industry, let's look at some of the things that my grandparents' generation fought for. Giving drivers more flexibility to get there when they're safe to do so. There used to be a day when truck drivers would pull over and help people on the side of the road that they didn't even know. They were the knights of the highway.
Exactly.
They were the enforcers of safe conditions, because that's their workplace. And we've destroyed their ability to make a good wage. And we've said, only when the wheels are turning. And we've basically starved them into this kind of situation. So I got to get the book in here. It's called Data Driven. I highly suggest this. We're going to get links out. Truckers, Technology, and the New Workplace Surveillance, written by Karen Levy. We'll get links out. You can also check out her website, Karen-Levy.net. We'll get stuff out to that. I highly suggest it. So, but here's the question I have. People are going, wow, that's just the trucking industry. That's just, it's just those truck drivers. Who cares? They'll be gone in the morning. Why does this matter to someone sitting in a cubicle? Why does this matter to someone working any other kind of job? Why is this important?
Yeah, I think, anybody who has a manager, this stuff is coming for you too, right? There was a great story in the New York Times last year about productivity monitoring, and one of the people that they interviewed was a hospice chaplain. Like, can you think of a job that lends itself less to digital monitoring than being a hospice chaplain, right? Like talking to the families of bereaved people. But she wrote about, the reporter wrote about how she got, 2 points for every phone call she made to like the daughter. I mean, it was just awful, right? But it's a good example of how the things that are happening to truckers, are really happening across the board. They're happening in medicine, they're happening in education, they're happening to all kinds of different jobs, because the technology is really cheap and because it's easier to deploy those tools than it is to actually solve the problems in a lot of these industries. Right. So I think workers, anybody who has a job where they're managed, whether that's remote, right? Like truckers were immune from some of this stuff for a while because they were on the road and we didn't have great ways to have oversight over them.
That's what drove, honestly, that's what drove me to the industry.
Really?
You head out the gate and you are the captain of your ship. You'll get there when you get there. And I've said, over 2 million miles myself. I've said, I've never been late because the wheel, it's always here up on its wheels. You've had to come get me out of a ditch. I haven't hit anybody. I'll get there when I get there. And, I never gave excuses of what happened along the way. When I got to A to B, everything in between was me. Now you see these, what did you do for this 6 minutes? Where were you for this 8 minutes? That's not what drew me to the industry. Yeah. And again, I fear that this trickles down to the rest of the industry. Now, you point out that AI is cheap to deploy. And look, this is the reason why I think there's a push to replace truck drivers. and automate this. And I think you could do this right now. I tell guys where I live here in central Pennsylvania, you could put a set on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, run it right through the Ohio Turnpike, right through the Indiana Turnpike, right to Chicago, and you wouldn't even have to fuel. It would just go like on a rail. Because you get 7-10 of those in a row, you could lose a lot of jobs in that initial phase, which is why I think we need to, as legislators, as policy people, as voters, start talking about how are we going to negotiate this for the working class? Because every technological advancement comes with a class of workers taking it on the chin. And this is going to be the most disruptive, I think, in history. And I know they probably have said that in other times. But we have the ability to look back. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying we smash the machines, but we got to do something to prepare. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I am a little bit heartened. I don't know if you share this opinion, Rick, but I'm a little bit heartened by the fact that the Biden administration, especially the Office of Science and Technology Policy, does seem to be pretty seriously concerned about some of these issues. They have a request for information out that I think the comments are due tomorrow. They're interested in gathering stories from people who have been surveilled or where their jobs have been automated at work. And they're interested in deploying different regulations to try to protect folks in these positions. Some of it certainly is, what do we do if people lose their jobs, right? Retraining, stuff like that. But some of it is also making sure that the dignity of work is protected. So even for people who still have jobs, how do we make sure that their power is not, or their bargaining power, their ability to negotiate wages, their ability to unionize? How do we ensure that these tools aren't deployed in such a way that it's unduly limiting that capability for workers?
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of ideas on this, especially when you're talking about truck drivers and low wage workers who are going to be affected by this. And I think there has to be a technology tax to make moving to these technologies much more expensive. Look, I'm not against it, but there's got to be a transition, and a just transition, so workers don't take it on the chin. And, like I said, what are you going to train a 55-year-old truck driver to do to get him to the last 10 years before retirement? You're not going to train him to do anything that's going to make $100,000 a year like he's making, or 50 or 70 or whatever they're making now on the road. You're not going to get that. So there's got to be a way to make that person whole, to get them to retirement, and to help the next generation a little bit as we transition. So I think a technology tax is a huge part of this, and there's got to be a way to. And I'm not a universal basic income guy, but there's got to be something that attaches to other work that raises your wages to compensate. There's got to be a way forward. We're a smart species. If we can develop the thing that's going to destroy us, maybe we can figure out how to stop it and have it not destroy us. Thoughts?
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too. So last question I've got for you. What are you hoping to get out of this? What are you hoping folks take away from the book? And I hope folks will buy it. Data-driven truckers, technology, and the new workplace surveillance, written by Karen Levy, Karen-Levy.net, the website. We'll get links out so you can take a look at that. What are you hoping people take away from this?
Honestly, have been so humbled by the generosity that folks in trucking and in other low wage workplaces have shown me. The thing I most want to do is just be able to help share their stories, help share some of the generosity that's been given to me. I just want to pay that forward and make more people aware of, what these essential workers do and the risk that they put themselves at every single day so that you can get your Amazon Prime packages.
Yeah.
Should all be, we should not only be grateful and we should have a higher public opinion of these folks, but we also need to show it with policy, right? Like show it with fair wages and with infrastructure.
No, so absolutely. One of the things I love that you do in the book is you put a name and I imagine a face to that name, into that story, because it's easy to lump all these people into those are just truck drivers, instead of hey, that's Rick the truck driver, that's my neighbor. That's my brother, that's whatever. So I think by humanizing it, I think that's really important as well.
Well, thank you.
Good stuff. Again, the book, Data Driven by Karen Levy. We'll get links out, Karen-Levy.net. Karen, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. It's been fun to join you.
Thanks so much. Again, the Karen-Levy.net. That's the website. I want you to take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1924. 300 members of the International Workers of the World, or Wobblies, gathered at their union hall in San Pedro, California. They were holding a benefit for two of their members who had been killed in a railway accident. For the past year, the KKK had targeted the San Pedro IWW members. The Wobblies had led a strike of longshoremen the year before. Famous socialist author Upton Sinclair had visited San Pedro to address the striking members of the Marine Transport Workers. Known for his books such as The Jungle, Sinclair wrote novels depicting the harsh conditions of industrial work. To begin his speech, Sinclair planned to read the Bill of Rights. As he was reading the First Amendment, the one guaranteeing the right to free speech, he was arrested by police. The police and KKK members continued to harass the striking workers. Even after the strike ended, anger against the IWW simmered. That anger boiled over when KKK thugs stormed the benefit meeting, beating IWW members. They tarred and feathered some. They also flung scalding hot coffee at two children, who had to be hospitalized due to their injuries. A photographer who captured images of the injured children wrote a description of the events. Andrew Kruglis, age 9. Is in serious condition. He was the first one out of the hall. As the fiends came rushing in, Andrew ran as fast as he could for a block when overcome by a man in blue who threw a pot of boiling grease on his bare legs. In addition to the injuries caused, the raiders also destroyed the contents of the Union's hall. The violence at San Pedro was just one chapter of ongoing harassment against IWW organizing up and down the West Coast. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind? Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Miss any of the program podcast? Always available, always there for you. I want to finish up today with an email from Jack. He says, since 2010, Walker/Republicans, he's talking about Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin at the time, this is their takeover and continued gerrymandering of our Wisconsin government. Republicans have continued to attack both secondary and university education here in Wisconsin. He says in 2010, students could still go to the UW-Madison without huge debt if they had to borrow to get through, and many could, working part-time during the school year and summers, pay for their entire education at what was one of the best universities, public or private, in the country. Now it costs about $25,000 per year to go to UW-Madison. With other non-related expenses, it is not improbable for a graduate of a so-called public university to leave with a debt of $50,000 or more. He says university education is no longer a realistic option for the majority of Wisconsinites, thanks to repeated Republican defunding of that system. As Trump stated, Republicans love the poorly educated. And look, this is not just a Wisconsin thing. This is across the country. Where I'm at in Pennsylvania, it's the same thing. I said before, back in the 80s, 2/3 were picked up by the tax base. A third was picked up by the student. Now it's completely on its head, where 3/4 of the cost of a public education, a public higher education, is now borne by the students. And look, I've got a relative who's $100,000 in debt going to public universities to become a veterinarian, and she's not going to make it. She's not going to become a veterinarian. She's taking this step down because she can't take out any more loans to get to be a veterinarian. It's mind blowing. And then they hear the conditions, the terms of these loans. It should be angering to every parent. But Republicans are on the way. Tommy Tuberville, the dumbest guy in the Senate, he's going to help. And tomorrow on the program, we are going to get to the Republican plan in the Senate to save higher education. Republicans have got some, much like the Tax Cuts for Working Families Act. In the Senate, Republicans have some legislation gonna help make things a little easier, make things a little bit better for college students to go to college. And if you believe that, I've got bridges. Because again, I look at what they propose and what they put forth. Republicans hate working people. Just look at what they do. So I hope someone will try and prove me wrong. I love those emails. Please do. rick@thericksmithshow.com. Please. Because I want Republicans to come back to sane line. I want them to come back to saying, hey, how do we make people's lives better? Get me some decent Republicans, please. Please. Anyway, if you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.